You want to go somewhere else and stop along the way, you can pull over. You cannot tell that train conductor, hey, this place looks cool. Can I poke around for a little while? You're on everyone else's program.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com. Happy Wednesday morning and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I'm Erik here with AJ. And today we're going to talk about Delta redemptions and also how to plan and book the shorter trips once you've arrived on a new continent. As you probably know from listening to this show, the best values for your points are often the overwater flights from one continent or region of the world to another. But once you hit the ground, you'll still need more transport to make the most of your trip. So we're going to dive into how to decide if points are a good value for those little trips and cover some of the other options besides air travel. You can find show notes for today's episode at abroaders.com/explore.
That's a good spot to have show notes on. Explore. This better be a good show because it's a pretty prime time.
Good for SEO. I'm sure there's people out there, all you explorers out there, I hope you found us because of that page. This is going to be the last show recorded in the United States for me until Christmas. AJ and I are in Detroit, heads down, working very hard on getting more than a dozen new customers up and running with our full-service travel hacking. We managed to get out of the lab a couple of times for some fun in the Motor City. I got to tell you, man, I like Detroit more and more every time I come here.
Yeah, man, it's great. It's a diamond in the rough. And unless you live here or know somebody that lives here, it's just easy to write it off because there's so much negativity in the news every which way. I mean, there's negativity about just actual crime. There's negativity about the city and their financial situation, but there
floods.
Yeah, floods.
It's not underwater. Everything's
all sorts
fine.
of stuff. I mean, but there's a certain spirit with the people in Detroit that's really exciting and contagious. Friday night, Erik and I met up with Scott Brills, who we had on the show, and a few other entrepreneurs in a really cool space. An entrepreneur bought a big, essentially like a empty warehouse, and we did a little taco bar and beers and just kind of talked business, talked life and travel. And then last night went to one of my favorite bars in Detroit that I don't go to enough. It's Cafe de Mongo. Really good live music, a kind of old rundown place with thousands of dollars worth of stuff on the walls. So, trumpets, guitars, memorabilia, a very unique, cozy place.
Yeah, I felt like I wasn't quite cultured enough to be there. I didn't quite get all the stuff. I was looking at all these old jazz musicians and like signed plaques and stuff like that. Definitely a place to go back to. And if any of you guys find yourselves in Detroit, highly recommend Cafe de Mongo.
Yeah, check out Cafe de Mongo. Great place to grab a drink. One more thing that I found kind of hilarious. One Direction was in town. And when Erik and I were heading to Cafe de Mongo, we ran into a couple of scared mothers shepherding their daughters around from the One Direction concert looking for their hotel. They were lost and absolutely petrified downtown Detroit. They thought they were going to get killed or something. So that was pretty comical to run into them.
Yeah, they definitely looked out of their element. Nothing to be afraid of, especially where we ran into them. Pretty nice.
No, absolutely not, man. The downtown is a great area. I mean, if you're on the fringes of the city, it can be a little bit nasty, but stay downtown. That's where the action is, and you'll be good to go.
Cool. All right, so before we get into the rest of the show here, a quick update. Last week, we announced that we were going to be hiring an intern, and we had a couple of people apply, and we did pick one intern to start working with us immediately. We're welcoming Brittany to the Abroaders team. We are going to be looking to add a few more over the next couple of months. So if you're still interested, you haven't totally missed your chance, shoot us an email to support@abroaders.com, and we will get you on the list. And
I think it was a little bit of an inside job there. Erik cherry-picking his University of Michigan alum.
Yeah, go blue. Got one more U of M alum on the team. Well, it's up to you. You can find a Sparty to come join us next.
I'll have to do a little bit of searching.
All right. We haven't talked a ton about specific travel inspiration lately on the show. We've had some cool guests, but AJ had the idea of putting together a few of our favorite travel documentaries and shows that you can find on Netflix. So let's get inspired.
Yeah. So the point behind this is these are shows that we have seen and we enjoy and recommend. The first one is Locked Up Abroad. Many of you have probably seen some episodes. It's pretty much the playbook on what not to do in traveling, which is pretty much don't get on a plane with a bunch of heroin or hashish or something that will get you the death sentence in a less developed country. But I picked out a few episodes here that I found interesting in particular. If you go onto Netflix and you look under season 1, the first episode I'm recommending is Colombia. Really interesting one about this karate instructor from California that rides his motorcycle all the way down and plans on going from California to finishing at southern tip of South America, but he gets caught by the FARC in Colombia, the paramilitary folks, and he has some serious character building to do. So I won't ruin anything more, but that's definitely one to check out. The next one is in season 3. It's an episode titled Indonesia. It's about an Aussie that runs into some trouble getting essentially framed for smuggling hash. And Indonesia is not the place you want to be trafficking drugs, as it is punishable by death. So
yeah, I remember that being on the entry ticket on the way through customs last year. We had just come from Prague, where you can legally carry a gram of cocaine and an ounce of pot. The entrance ticket said trafficking of drugs is punishable by death in Indonesia. So you don't want to mess with that.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy stuff. The final Locked Up Abroad episode is in season 4. It is The Real Midnight Express. This one is beyond belief. Some of you may have read the book, The Midnight Express, but this is just chronicles, without giving too much away, a guy that got caught up in the struggle of moving some drugs, did some time, and it's unimaginable how many things went wrong and the perseverance this guy displayed throughout the duration of the episode. The next thing is Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown. Awesome show. Features a bunch of places. I just picked out season 2, episode Copenhagen, because it's pretty inspiring from a travel perspective as well as an entrepreneurial perspective. This guy that owns this Noma restaurant in Copenhagen, talk about wanting to be the best in the world and being the best in the world. It's inspiring to see how this guy goes about running his restaurant.
Sounds pretty cool, man. The last one I want to mention here is 180 South. This covers the journey of Jeff Johnson as he travels from California to Patagonia, Chile, retracing the 1968 trip of Yvonne Chenard and Doug Tompkins that they took in their Ford E-Series Ecoline van. We got a link to that rig in the show notes as well. Pretty awesome vehicle.
Pretty interesting. So Yvonne and Doug are the founders of Patagonia and North Face. So Yvonne founded Patagonia and Doug founded North Face, and they're both huge conservation guys in Chile, and they're using the blueprint of the American national parks to try to help Chile preserve some of their own land, because they're running into that nasty issue of over-commercialization and deforestation and stuff. So pretty inspiring, pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool story, and Chile does have some of the most beautiful natural terrain in the world that I've ever seen, so I certainly hope they continue. It sounds like they did some good idea spotting on their trip down to Patagonia.
The amount of acreage they have, I forget how many acres, it's mind-boggling. There's some resistance from the Chilean government at first because they didn't want these gringos coming in and buying land and doing bad stuff, but once they saw what they're doing, it's truly amazing. I definitely recommend checking 180 South.
Very cool. All right, let's talk about some credit card offers. We got 2 new offers that came out in the past week from Amex.
Yeah, so there's an Amex Gold Delta card. There is a personal card and a business card. Both cards have 50,000 Delta Skymiles bonuses when you sign up and hit a minimum spend of $1,000 within 3 months. Now, each card does have an annual fee of $95, but it's kind of countered by a $50 statement credit on any Delta purchase. So, like, what's an example of a way to get a kicker on that? Obviously, if you book a flight, but lounge access as well, correct?
Yeah, so you could potentially use the card to buy anything from Delta, lounge access, drinks on a flight, something like that, and get that $50 credit. The big thing is that it's a small spending requirement of $1,000, and those 50,000 points are going to be valuable. Let's jump into a couple of redemption notes about Delta, because SkyMiles are often considered to be one of the least valuable airline currencies out there, but there are some strategic uses. The sign-up bonuses AJ just mentioned could be worth 100,000 points together, which definitely gives you enough to be able to get some great value out of the redemption.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is a time to kind of retake a look at Delta. So first of all, Delta is in the SkyTeam Alliance, which means they have 19 SkyTeam partners. We've got a page on Delta at the abroaders.com website, so we're going to link to that in the show notes so you can take a look at all this information. But we're going to cover a couple of the highlights here.
Yeah, some great non-alliance partners are Alaska Airlines, GOL, which is a Brazilian airline, Hawaiian Airlines, Malaysia Airlines, Virgin Atlantic, and Virgin Australia.
Yeah, there's some great redemption opportunities in there. A few rules to keep in mind. First of all, Delta does not let you use your SkyMiles for first-class redemptions on their partners. So business is the top level of luxury that you can get with your SkyMiles. It's probably a good thing anyways, because those first-class redemptions, if you do book them, they have to be on Delta's planes, and it's just not that good of a value. They're pretty expensive. So we're going to talk a little bit about the business class tickets in just a second. Another rule that you want to keep in mind is there are no one-way redemptions on Delta. It's a critical point because you can't book one-ways at half the price of round trip, which means you've got to have more miles in the bank to really be able to use your miles as a redemption. That will change in 2015. They are going to do one-way redemptions, which is going to be awesome. But in the meantime, if you're not going to hold on and sit on those miles until 2015, you're going to have to book a round trip.
Yep.
Next thing is they do offer a 2-day hold on award availability, which means if you can find the availability, you're going to be able to hold on to those seats for up to 2 days while you get everything else organized about your travel. It's not quite as good as American Airlines that offers a 5-day hold, but certainly better than most airlines. There aren't a lot of them out there that let you hold award tickets even for a minute.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A couple other notable things as far as stopovers go. You can have stopovers. You get one per round trip, and you can combine that with an OpenJaw, which you can also get one per round trip. Now, the rule on the OpenJaw is it can be combined with a stopover, but the unflown segment must be shorter than the flown segment. So what the hell does that even mean? That sounds like some bureaucratic gibbery-jew.
Brilliant South Park reference. We link over to that episode. That's from Cartoon Wars. An OpenJaw is just about flying out of a different airport than your arrival airport. It can be awesome because it makes it easier to see another destination on your trip without having to double back. So if you could imagine I'm flying to London, say from Atlanta, and I want to come home from Paris. That means I can explore Europe and do whatever I want in between London and Paris, and I don't have to backtrack all the way back to London just to catch my flight home. In this situation, you're responsible for your travel between London and Paris, which is the unflown segment that AJ just mentioned. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how to maximize those unflown segments and transportation around once you get to your destination. The rule basically says that the travel required to connect the OpenJaw can't be longer than either of the flights that you're taking. So in this case, the flights are from the US to Europe, Atlanta to London. They're just saying that Paris can't be further away from London than Atlanta was.
Right.
So that's basically the way to think about it. It doesn't come up all that much. An example that you couldn't do would be like in Atlanta to London and then OpenJaw home from Toronto, Canada to Atlanta. You wouldn't want to do that. It doesn't make a ton of sense. But if the ticket's not pricing, it might be because you've got a really long OpenJaw and a somewhat shorter initial flight or return flight home. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at those Delta redemptions.
Good explanation, man. You did a pretty good job with that.
It's confusing. They're trying to make it hard, man.
Yeah, it makes sense from their point. So a couple more things to note is we've got no closing booking fee, but within 72 hours, there are no changes allowed, and that is $150.
Any changes with Delta are going to be $150, but under that 72-hour window, you can't change your itinerary, which is a big issue. So if you're a couple days from departure, you're not going to be able to change it. You're going to lose your miles if you can't make your trip. That's something you definitely want to keep in mind. You want to have some confidence about being able to make that trip. The no close-in booking fee is awesome. The only other major program that we deal with a lot that has that is British Airways. So Delta and British Airways, that should be your go-to. If you're under 21 days and you don't want to pay that $75 fee, you're going to want to book with Delta or British Airways because they won't charge it for those close-in bookings.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's talk about searching for award space. How do you find the available seats that you can book with miles? One thing to note is don't necessarily depend on Delta.com. So it's added some searchability for more partners, but it's still pretty much broken. It only prices out the more simple itineraries. It doesn't show anywhere near all of your options that are actually available, and it's pretty bad at finding the availability for the partners. So that is definitely something to note. Don't rely just on Delta.com.
Yeah, a good place to start is to think about pricing your itineraries out leg by leg. So each segment of the flight you want to look at individually before you go and try and plug it into the Delta website. The reason for this rule of thumb is that Delta has tiered pricing like most airlines. So there's a saver level, there's a standard level, and there's a peak level of pricing. And the standard and peak are ripoffs. You really don't want to be using your miles at those areas. And so what happens is if you've got an itinerary, let's go back to that example from before. I'm doing Atlanta to London and with a stopover, and then I want to do London to Amsterdam, and then I'm going to fly home from Paris. So pretty much the same thing, we're just adding Amsterdam in there. What can happen is that really short segment from London to Amsterdam might be at the standard award level or the peak award level. And that's going to screw up your entire pricing. The example in that particular case would be that even though it's a really small part of the total distance, the one segment would raise your trip from 125,000. That's the saver level in business class to Europe. So US to Europe, you're paying 125,000 miles in business class. If you just have that one tiny segment that screws it up by being a peak award, you're looking at 325,000 points. It's totally illogical the way that it's set up. But what you need to know is that if you can't find a saver level for that little segment, you just need to cut that out of your trip. And so you can still do the same thing. You can go Atlanta to London, Paris to Atlanta, and you just find your way to Amsterdam from London and do whatever else you want in Europe. And you're saving over 200,000. Yeah, 200,000
miles. Yeah, like Eric said, just piece together that little flight, with the train, or spend $100 to save a couple 100,000 miles with it, which is a huge save there. I mean, considering what 200,000 miles can get you.
Yeah. The next thing that we want to talk about is looking at partner flights. Delta, well, it's like AJ said, far from perfect. It's decent at finding its own award availability. But Delta's horrible at searching their SkyTeam partners, and most of it's because they're greedy and they don't want to pay their partners for putting you in one of the award seats. So what you need to do is take a look at KLM or Air France's website. Those have a really good search function because it lets you look at a full calendar of dates. So instead of having to go date by date and checking the availability on every one, you can see the whole calendar and see what's available. And the good news is that all partner flights that are bookable on Delta are going to be at that saver level. So you don't have to worry about partners screwing up your pricing across the board. Like I said, you do need an Air France account, which is free to sign up. So you can just sign up. It's called Flying Blue. If you go to Air France's website, you can sign up for free. Just give them your email and name, and then you'll have access to their booking search, and you'll be able to find any of those SkyTeam partners to make those redemptions on Delta a little easier. So the bottom line there is you're just going to piece the flights together, and you just get a pen and paper and write down those segments. And once you've used Air France's site to find all the individual flights you want, then go to delta.com and use the multi-city search and try and put those itineraries in. I'm still going to give you less than a 50% chance of succeeding there, so you'll probably have to call. The bottom line is if you found it on Air France's website, it should be bookable on Delta. You'll just have to call and spend a little time on hold or hire us to book it for you.
Good point, man. Nice plug. I like that. Let's talk about some specific regions. So talk about Europe with Skymiles. What are the opportunities?
Virgin Atlantic is a really good one. I want to focus on business class for just a minute because 100,000 is only 25,000 miles short of a business class redemption. Anybody that's got Amex points can move that extra 20,000.
Now we're talking about Europe right now, 120K.
Yep. And their partner, Virgin Atlantic, is a really nice airline. They call their business class upper class.
So elitist.
Yeah, very English of them. Those fuel surcharges don't get added to the ticket when you're booking through Delta. And that's actually a new development. If you are looking for travel to Europe, definitely take a look at Virgin Atlantic's upper class, business class tickets, and you're going to be able to use those Delta miles at 125 round trip. That's a really good value.
Yeah, especially considering the hard product, what kind of plane you're actually going to be on.
Yep, definitely a lot nicer than Delta's business class. So take a look at that. What about getting to Australia? That's one of the hard destinations out there.
Yes, and Delta is one of the best ways to get there in business class in a plane that's worthwhile using the miles for. So to get to Australia with Delta Skymiles, it's 160,000 round trip. So it's 80K each way is what their chart will tell you.
You got to be careful with that because they write it on the chart as a one-way, but they don't let you book it one-way.
So make sure that you do have 160K if you're going to do anything with Australia. So you can get a round trip in business class on Virgin, which is kind of the same opportunity as getting to Europe on Virgin. So you're using one of Delta's partners as a really nice product, a really luxurious business class, and 160,000 Skymiles isn't really a bad deal. There are a couple things to note with the availability. There's been some trends as far as how many seats are available each day. And right now it looks like there's 4 seats each day on each flight. If you look and see that there's no availability, the next day there might be availability. So you just have to keep on checking. So I guess the rule of thumb would be if you have no luck, try to check early in the day before those 4 seats get taken up by somebody else that's using their miles.
Yep, and I know you can use the Virgin website as well to do a little looking. I'm not sure if that has the calendar view, but it's probably better than Delta. So take a look and let us know if you need help looking for that availability. Last thing to think about with the trip to Australia is that most other carriers don't offer a direct flight to Australia. There's only a few that are very achievable with miles that are direct from the west coast of the United States to Australia. Otherwise, you're going to be routing through Asia, which isn't necessarily a terrible thing if you want to do a stopover.
Right.
The thing to keep in mind is if you're just trying to get to Australia, you've got maybe a short vacation window and you want to spend your time down under, you don't want to be booking through Asia and spending an extra 10 hours on a plane just to get there. It's a really nice value to get that direct flight as well.
Yeah, speaking of the availability of just the airlines that fly there on those routes, I forget which airline it was. Is it Delta that's going to stop one of their routes, like LA to Melbourne? Once United starts servicing that route, they're going to just call it quits and not even compete.
Yep, we're going to try and update that on our site as well. But United did announce an LAX to Melbourne itinerary, and it looks like Delta is going to fold the cards, take a knee on that one, and give up as soon as United bumps into that route. Okay, let's talk about getting around once you get there.
Mm-hmm.
The idea for talking about exploration in a new continent came to me as I sorted out the details of my Europe trip that I'm taking off tomorrow. I'm flying on a United ticket to get to Europe, taking advantage of an OpenJaw, so I'm flying into Rome, leaving from Genoa, Italy, and doing a long stopover in Barcelona before heading back to the US. The Barcelona stopover is 6 weeks, so I've got a bunch of time to travel around Europe. My plans were to go to Athens, Santorini, Mykonos, Vienna, and Berlin before getting back to Barcelona for my flight home. Money is a bit tight, and I wanted to try and use miles wherever possible, but I discovered it could be a little bit challenging.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're looking at a pretty aggressive itinerary there. Can you share how you decided on, which flights were a good deal with points, which ones you just bite the bullet and buy cash?
So the problem with the flights in Europe is that the taxes and fees, and sometimes fuel surcharges are in that as well, you're going to pay those even if you use miles. They tend to be a big percentage of the ticket price for whatever reason in Europe. It turned out, for example, that using miles from Barcelona to Athens was going to cost $120 plus 15,000 British Airways Avios points. Just buying the ticket was only $150. So it would have been 15,000 points to save $30. Obviously a pathetic value there. And on top of that, you got to look at the routing. That's a really critical part of this. British Airways loves to route you through London. That's their hub. They want you to fly on their planes. Yep. And so the only availability was going to be a really long day of travel with a huge stopover in London and all the taxes that come with Heathrow Airport. The flight that I booked for $150 was under 3 hours direct flight from Barcelona to Athens.
Yeah.
So look at that. Always check the actual price to buy and do that math. In this case, I was saving $30 by using miles, and then just divide that by your 15,000 miles to see how many cents per point you're getting. You want to get at least 2 cents per point. If you're not getting 2 cents per point, it's probably better to buy the ticket.
Yeah. The only exception is if you're absolutely printing miles and you've got millions and millions of miles, then, whatever. But for 99% of travel hackers, that's an equation to definitely run.
That's a great point. I mean, in the end of the day, the good redemption is the one that makes you happy and gets you where you want to go. That's my rule of thumb. That's kind of where I draw the line. And if it's possible to buy a ticket, I'm going to get less than 2 cents a point for my points. I'm going to pay cash and save those points for another day.
Yeah, man. So your example, that was a pretty clear-cut, easy choice from our point of view. Did you manage any flights with points in Europe?
Yeah, that's why you got to look through all the options and really pay attention. It would have been easy to give up after that mess with the Athens trip. But British Airways, they have some partners that do offer direct flights in Europe. And so that's really the key, is there wasn't a British Airways partner that was going to do direct from Barcelona to Athens. That was where the routing through London came in. Returning from Greece, my goal was to go from Greece to Berlin. And I found out that there was a direct flight from Mykonos, which is one of the islands in the Mediterranean, and that goes to Vienna, and then there was another direct flight from Vienna to Berlin. For that, it was only $100 plus 12,000 avios. The travel from Greece to Germany, if I were going to pay for it, was going to cost over $300 just for that flight. So I basically was able to save $200, but also get a free stopover for 2 days. And for me, that was a good value.
That's pretty slick. Another thing, too, just to keep in mind when Eric's talking about British Airways is that's a distance-based chart. So in the previous example of routing through London, that's not only going to waste your time, it's going to waste more miles, it's going to cost more because you're not heading directly there. You're racking up additional flown miles, which causes more points to be used.
Yeah, that's a great point, and something that you should always keep in mind with British Airways in general is you're looking for direct flights. It's very rare that a flight that's not direct is going to be a great deal on British Airways.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got kind of a set of similar choices to make coming up. You want to run through your itinerary and sort of your game plan for how you're going to get this booked?
Yeah, so my trip is actually pretty simple conceptually. I know I'm flying into Europe, probably Central Europe, and I know I want to spend some time there, enter a stopover. But I do need to get to Asia before I head home on that trip.
Okay, so you're going to do a couple of weeks in Europe, and you want to make that onward travel to Asia. You're planning on using miles for those big segments from the U.S. to Europe and Europe to Asia, and then Asia back to the USA, right?
Yeah, so the high-level view of my itinerary is going to be I'm going to transfer Chase points to United, It's going to be 80,000 points. I'm going to fly from Detroit to most likely somewhere in Central Europe, stopover. Then I'm going to head to Asia to Bangkok, and then I'm going to OpenJaw home from Saigon. But while I'm in Europe, I'm probably not going to do any flying, I don't think, because I'm going to be in a pretty tight triangle. And most likely I'm going to fly into Berlin, and then I think I'll enjoy the adventure of renting a car, heading up to Warsaw, down to Prague, and then connecting back to Berlin to get to Asia. So I don't think I'm going to be doing any flying. I think I'm going to enjoy the autonomy of having my own car in Europe and just
I think that's
around.
a great idea, man. As long as you know how to drive a stick shift.
Hey, thanks to you, man. You
great
did.
shape.
For those that don't know, Eric taught me how to drive a stick shift on the Autobahn last year.
Yeah, my mom just confessed she doesn't remember how to drive one, so it looks like I'm on driving duty anytime we're renting a car in Europe for our little trip coming up this week.
Yeah. Well, speaking about getting around, plane, train, automobile, bus, you want to dive into a little bit of our experiences and our philosophy on getting around once you get to that continent or that country?
Yeah, man. So it's pretty easy to forget when you're spending so much time focusing on frequent flyer miles and points and travel that there's a lot of other ways besides flying to get to your destination. The thing about flying is that nowadays with security and everything like that, it takes hours. You have to show up at the airport at least an hour early. Most places, the more civilized parts of the world that are really freaked out about security, it can be a couple hours. A train ride could be a couple of hours from, say, Madrid to Barcelona, and you can fly there, but you got to get a cab to the airport, and then, airports
Yeah, if your
tend to be
flight's
outside.
under an hour, your travel time is actually going to be extended. It's going to be more time than taking a train or a bus, most likely, because you don't have to show up an hour and a half early and get patted down to get on a bus, typically.
Yep, don't have to get felt up by the
also,
security.
it depends on where you are in the world. So just kind of hopping around the world, my personal experience. So unfortunately, the U.S. public transit sucks, so you kind of do need to fly places. There's the Greyhound bus and the Amtrak, but that's not a great value. South America, busing is where it happens. That's where you save money, and it can be kind of an enjoyable experience. Really no...
It can also be a terrible experience, but I like the buses in Latin America.
Yeah, especially if you're, sharing a bottle of Johnny Walker with a buddy.
That's very true.
Europe is more train-centric. What was your experience last year riding rails in Europe?
I definitely liked it. I mean, I think that there's a lot more space to be had, and it's nice to be able to get up and walk around. So I think I value that a lot about trains. I think Wi-Fi is probably coming in the near future for train transport in Europe.
Yeah, for all we know, it's on other routes that we didn't take. We were just kind of Munich, Berlin, Prague.
Yeah, so if you've got work to do or you just don't want to be crammed into a tight quarters of a bus, I think train can be a really nice alternative. The other thing about trains is that train stations tend to be really central. Train's the old transport in Europe, and so train stations are downtown, which means that if you are staying in the city center, whether that's Airbnb or hotel, you've got an opportunity to get to the train station. You can show up 5 minutes before the train's supposed to leave, and you're out, and you don't have to travel to the outskirts of the city.
Yeah, another good point on that is the hidden cost of flying somewhere. For the World Cup, man, when we flew into Natal, it was like a $70 cab ride to get from the airport to the actual city where all the action was. I mean, as you know, most airports, like Eric said, are way outside the city. So unless you're like in Munich and you can take a train or something from the airport, if you have to cab it, that's another hidden cost that you're going to avoid if you take a train and get city center.
Definitely something to look into. We don't really have a comprehensive resource right now for airports and what the public transit looks like. I think that'd be something very cool to put together.
Yeah.
But for now, you can do your own research there pretty easily. Just see what you can find about how to get to city center from the airport. And if it's an airport that doesn't have many options, you got to add into your analysis that you're going to be paying for a cab or something like that to get where you want to go after you land.
Yeah, definitely.
Last thing, we got cars. We've got a lot of great options for transport, but nothing really makes you autonomous like having your own vehicle and being able to stop when you want.
Yeah, that was a great experience when we rented that car in Berlin last year and drove to Munich. It was just such a nice feeling just to be on our own pace. You want to stop and grab a beverage, you can pull over. You want to stop and grab a bite to eat, you can pull over. You want to go somewhere else and stop along the way, you can pull over. You cannot tell that train conductor, hey, this place looks cool. Can I poke around for a little while? You're on everyone else's program. It's kind of fun to see how other people do stuff. The Autobahn was a cool experience.
Yeah. One quick tip for renting a car. For the most part, if you have driving insurance in the U.S., you're going to have coverage, but it's probably not the ideal source of coverage. And so credit cards can be really valuable. The two I want to mention are the Chase Sapphire Preferred and the United Plus Explorer, also by Chase. The reason is that those cards have primary rental coverage. And so what that means is you don't have to get denied by your own insurance company first for them to pay out. they're the first line of defense. And so that primary difference is huge. Most credit cards offer secondary coverage, which means not only do you have to file a claim with your insurance at home, which is possibly going to make your premiums go up, but you got to go through a lot more paperwork because the credit card company has to get a denial from your insurance company before they'll pay anything. With the Chase Sapphire Preferred and the United Explorer cards, it's primary coverage. It's a lot of coverage, I think up to 80 grand or 100 grand. And so,
so as long as you don't, crash a Lamborghini you rented, you're probably good to go.
Read the terms. I think there's exclusions for ridiculous cars, but it's a great value if you're just renting a car in Europe or anywhere else in the world and you want to not pay that $20 a day or $15 a day for that insurance.
Yeah, complete ripoff.
It's a huge ripoff, and with using the right credit card, you can get free insurance and not have to sweat it.
Yeah, another residual effect of travel hacking, having those right cards, man.
Yep. Cool, man. I think that does it for today's show. What do you got on tap for the Jam of the Week?
Okay, so this week's International Jam is one you may have heard of if you've been in touch with pretty much any European Top 40 chart. This song has reached number one in a bunch of places in Europe: Austria, Denmark, Germany, France, Hungary, and Slovakia, just to name a few. This week's International Jam is from a German artist, Robin Schulz, and the hit track, Prayer in C. Hope you enjoy.
See you guys next week.
Travel safe.
When seas will cover lands and when men will be no more, don't think you can forgive you. Yeah, when there'll just be silence and when life will be over, don't think you will forgive you.
Hey, brothers, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Erik or AJ at abroaders.com. We will see you next week.